My
Okay.
apologies, folks.
That's okay. No problem. Okay, so having just approved the meeting minutes with the revision of 6 months, that would have taken us till the end of March is what we voted on in the last meeting in August. However, we heard from Jack that council approved the extension of the list 6 months from today, which would be March 26, 2024. So,
Just put you on speakerphone.
oh, that must be Carolyn.
It's Carolyn. I'm going to put her on speakerphone.
Okay. So our next order of new business is to hear from Jack or Carolyn on what the discussion was yesterday, what the general consensus was about the list or using people off of the list. Bring us up to speed. I was not able to attend, nor was I able to look at, well, I don't even know if the video is posted that quickly, but tell us what happened, Jack or Carolyn.
There was no discussion about the list other than to extend it. And as far as the updates to the ordinance, or to, I don't know, what you call them, bylaws, what do we call the things we just ratified?
Rules and
regulations.
Rules and regulations.
Yeah, we approved that. There was one slight comment, and the comment came from Councilman Singer, and he was concerned about whether, in fact, we should have assistant or
The
alternate liaisons.
Mhm. And what was the comment?
Was it necessary now that we have a member board of 5?
Oh,
He thought so that should be taken into consideration and thought about. So,
okay.
but no action. It was just a discussion.
Yeah, and they'll have to set up an executive session for council to discuss any of the I guess the situation where we're at right now of hiring, so that would have to be set up in the future for any discussion.
What does he have to set up an executive session for? I didn't hear you. Sorry, Carolyn.
That's council's executive session.
He wants clarification on why council needs an executive session, Carolyn.
Well, because I just know whatever reason's gonna bring up, our attorney is gonna say this needs to be an executive session. So I think, especially given the situation where we're at right now, that's what they would suggest us to do.
In other words, hiring, we would take that up.
So you guys are going to take up the an executive session, the hiring discussion. Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. But I'm curious that there was no discussion about the need to extend the list. No one asked about why we were suggesting extending it, or no one had any comments or questions
Curious.
regarding.
I was curious about that also, only because of their displeasure that many people had about the list that we sent them. So I thought it was unusual, but it's what they decided. I went to the meeting for other reasons, and when I didn't remember that that was going to be covered. And I was curious about that also. But that's what happened.
So was that something that was discussed in advance, Jack, or do you think people knew?
We really can't discuss in advance. It has to be open forum. But I did have one council person suggest to me that the old list needed to be replaced. And I said, well, this gives us time to replace it.
Okay.
If we need to hire, we need to hire. We can't spend 6 months. There could be an emergency situation, whatever. So we have the opportunity to hire off of this list or extend it again. So it keeps us flexible.
Okay. And what is the situation? This is bullet point number 2 under new business. What are the plans for hiring now?
I think we're trying to get through our negotiation through the arbitration, I should say, of the police contract before we hire.
Can I ask what impact that would have? If we need officers, we need officers.
Well, there doesn't seem to be an urgent need for officers, and the impact is not immediate, it's long-term. There's a lot of long-term things in their contract that bring a lot of expense to the town, and they're trying to control the future expense. And I'll be happy to have an offside with you. I don't want to,
No, I don't want to bog them. I'm with you.
oops.
So we had talked about some possibilities in our last meeting. If the list were to be extended, we could potentially reach out to people to see, are they still interested in working at McCandless? And, you know, there's pros and cons of that. We might find out that some of the candidates who were at the top of the list previously are no longer interested or have other employment or whatever. Maybe they've moved away, who knows? And then, so then we could consider that information in our hiring decision. However, we could also raise expectations from those people that we will be hiring soon, and then if we don't, then we're further degrading our reputation as all talk and no action as a township.
I would just recommend holding off until they get this arbitration or whatever they're doing fixed and they're ready to hire before you talk to anybody about anything.
That makes the
Well,
most sense.
And I had a question for probably, this is probably a Falco question, but maybe not. But Falco should probably be the first to chime in anyway. So since we have given a list to town council and they've voted to extend it, so there is now an active list that's good through March 26th. Is it basically out of our hands with respect to the people on that list? Like, can we even reach out, even if, say, council wanted us to? Is it now entirely within council's hands because we have the list and they know who the people are and they're bound to, you know, the top 3 candidates unless one of them's eliminated and then somebody moves up?
Generally, yes, and I believe there have been communications with those at the top of the list on whether they continue to have interest. And my understanding is that some of them have responded that they do not have an interest. So it is in the hands of town council to now make a decision whether they're going to hire from the list or not.
Who do you think has had communications with them?
That's not a thing.
I've received different email communications from, I believe, both the chief and the manager.
Okay, so, well, that was information to me, so, so it is the case that some of them are no longer interested, but that's also new information. I thought that the personnel board would continue to play a role in managing that list and setting up interviews with people, perhaps if town council was interested in us doing that, but it sounds like we create the list and then step back. I didn't realize that was the case. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
Yes.
the ordinance does provide for the town council, now that they have a list, to schedule the interviews if town council wants to have interviews.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I think unless town council requests us to do something with it, I think it's out of our hands. I think once we certify that list, we're basically saying we're done with that list. Council, do what you want. I'm sure there's some provision where they could task us with doing something if they wanted, but unless they do that, I think we're done with that list. And then, so our role with respect to hiring then would be starting the process of getting another list together for when this one expires.
I have a question for Falco. We just rewrote the rules and how we're gonna score all this. Could the old list be rescored with the new scoring system?
No. We have to operate under what we had in place at the time.
Yeah, no ex post facto laws there, Jack.
That makes
Uh,
an interesting question.
What's that, Matt?
I said no ex post facto laws there, Jack. Hey, I got a question on the rules and regulations. What's the next step with that? Is that gonna be published somehow? Are we gonna get it? How are we getting it back out? How's it gonna be implemented?
Falco, I think the one sent around today with the agenda and the minutes is the most recent version, so everyone should have that. And again, that's just an internal document that I don't know where we would publish it.
Isn't it on the, isn't it on our?
It'd be on our
Yeah,
website.
website. It should be on our website.
Oh,
So-
really?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The old one was.
It is now a public document, so it's an official record of both the personnel board as well as the town. And it's effective as of the approval. So I guess it was at last month's town council's meeting, when they approved it without any changes is when it would take effect.
I think it was
Well,
yesterday.
Last night.
I recommend that we change the title of the document to reflect what it actually is instead of that Malio or whatever that is.
What?
Oh, yeah.
The final
it-
version.
Use electronic version.
When we
Uh,
posted on the website, it would say personnel board rules and regulations. I think the firm, Falco's firm name was on the title. I think I'm talking about Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had a follow-up question then on, so now we have an effective rules and regulations, they are now in effect. But what we talked about last time was having that, and then there's stage 2, which was the recommendations that we were making to council to change the ordinance in certain places to, to flow through to the rules and regulations eventually. But Jack, did you guys discuss that at all, or did we not? Or Jack or Carolyn? Sorry, Carolyn, I just can't see you on the screen, so I kind of forgot you were there. Did council discuss that part of it at all, or was it just approving what you got and then we're going to totally separately do the ordinance part of it if council is interested in doing that?
Carolyn, you want to run with that?
I can't even hear a word he's saying. Like, it's very muffled. I know it's David speaking, but that's it. I can't hear. I asked Ryan sent me the link, but I can't dial in the member ID since I'm driving. So I'm just struggling to hear you all.
Okay, essentially, he wanted to know if there was any discussion, and there was no discussion last night. Both were passed without discussion.
What
Both.
ordinances are you?
No one over the numerous months that we've been discussing this, no one has brought any questions to my attention. Yeah, there was no discussion. That's it. So.
Okay, we may not have even submitted those questions through Falco yet. Because we wanted to get the rules and regulations in place.
Ordinances is he talking about? Do you know? What ordinances are you talking about?
So when we put together the rules and regulations,
Yes.
we could put together rules and regulations insofar as they were consistent with with the town ordinances. But
Right.
there were certain things that we discussed that would not be consistent with the town ordinances. And so like changing the scoring system or the weighting in the scoring system is an example. That is set out in the town ordinance. So we couldn't do anything with that in the rules and regulations.
Oh, so those technically are not in place yet. Those, the new system for scoring is technically not in
No.
place.
No, it is.
It's, yeah, it is, but any changing to the weighting of the
Oh, the
oral
weighting.
exam versus the written exam, and there were some other changes in there that
Yeah.
I think Falco probably has a list of them, or somebody does somewhere, where they were changes that we discussed making and putting into the rules and regulations, but we couldn't because they were inconsistent with the ordinance. And so in the meeting where we voted to send the rules and regulations to council, what we said was, let's vote on rules and regulations that are consistent with the ordinance, just so that we can get them in place. And then phase 2 will be, then we will ask council, here are the things that we would like to see changed in the ordinance, so that we can then put them into our rules and regulations. But we can't do that until we send those requests to council and they actually change the ordinance. If they decide to do so, they may not agree with the things that we've discussed on that. end, but-
So we can have that discussion coming. That would be our next step, really.
Right, yeah, it's kind of phase 2. So phase 1 was getting the rules and regulations in place to the extent we could, with what we wanted to see. And then phase 2 is, okay, here's some additional changes we want to make, but town council, you have to do something first before we can do that.
Right. I do remember this. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. It's much
Okay.
more. Yes.
Sorry, because I was in the middle of all of it, it's just in my head, so.
We're on council as well, so that helps.
Well, can, Falco, do we need to make a motion to amend the agenda, or can we, to make a motion to have that submitted to the town council, or can we just make a motion to submit that to the town council?
Well, I think we first have to go back and identify what those issues are. I have the old drafts of the rules and regulations with some notations, but I think the personnel board needs to all circulate those issues again and make sure that the personnel board, has decided on what issues should be passed on to town council or what shouldn't be passed on.
So we need a list of those ordinances that do not coordinate with our, not rules and regulations, but what we would like to do. And that would be very helpful to have just a list of those items.
right.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
and if I remember right, Falco, I think you, in our original proposed ones that included the ones that were inconsistent with ordinances, I think you made
Yeah,
comments that said, this change is inconsistent. So maybe if we could just circulate that, your comments where you pointed that out.
That's how I remember it too. And so from my understanding is that we all agreed on all those changes. It's just we only forwarded the ones that were not in conflict with the ordinance.
Oh, that's a good point, Matt. I think you're right. I think we did. I don't remember 100%, but that does sound right now that you say it, that we approved all the changes, but we just couldn't send them all.
Yeah, so what does that look like from a process perspective, Falco? So we have this previous version where we had flagged, we wanted to, for instance, say that the alternates fill in for members when members roll off. Just as an example, that was inconsistent with the current ordinance, but can we just create a list like that and then send that to town council? Or do we have to rewrite the ordinance and send that as a proposal to town council?
I know that in the past, when we had recommended changes, we sent it to town council and set up as an ordinance amending the existing ordinance. If we don't want to follow that process, then and just create a list, we can pull those issues from the previous drafts and create the list, and then the town solicitor would have to fashion the ordinance to make those amendments.
So it sounds like the
Either
preferred
way,
is that we rewrite the ordinance the way we want it to look.
that's what we've done in the past.
Okay.
I need to throw another boomerang in here, and that is, we not only need to abide by the ordinances, but we also have a charter, town charter. And the town charter is what we had, well, it sets certain things up in certain parameters, so we have to, number one, make sure we're in line with the town charter, which is very hard to change. So, I mean, the likelihood of changing anything in the town charter's slim to none. So we have to make sure there's nothing that is affected there. And then we can look at the ordinances for the rest of it.
Okay.
Just from my understanding, it sounds like, Falco, this is work better suited probably for your angle. Once the personnel board just clearly identifies what those items are, you take that back with the direction of the council on making sure that you're in line with the charter and that you're writing the ordinances the way in which they need to be written. And the reason why I'm stating this is it would feel like we're skipping a step, or we're jumping the gun if the personnel board try to write the ordinances. You know what I mean?
Right,
Take a step
it should
back.
be between Falco and the town attorney.
Exactly, yes. So we should just
And
give
again,
them,
that's
and then you work on that piece, yes.
That's good.
right. And I believe, again, that's the way we approached it in the past as well.
Got it, okay. Sorry, maybe just my clarification, I was under the impression that you wanted us to take a pass at the ordinances with the changes and then give those through, but I'm clear now, thank you.
Okay, so we identify what we would like to have changed. Falco edits the ordinance to reflect those changes and then sends it to town council.
Or to the solicitor.
Oh,
And he also double checks to make sure it's not violating the charter or crossing the charter somehow.
Yeah,
Steve.
I think the charter is posted online as well. I believe I have access to that.
does town council not have to vote that in, or you would just confer with the solicitor first?
Oh, no. After it's cleared through both solicitors, then it's a two-step process with town council where they have to advertise the new ordinance and then at the next meeting adopt the ordinance. That's one of the reasons why, we knew we had enough time if the list was extended for 6 months to get any changes in place before testing started for a new list. So the 6 months definitely gives us that more than enough time to complete that process.
Okay. All right, so tell me if I've got it right. We identify the issues we would like to have changed. Falco edits the ordinance and checks it against the charter to make sure there's no discrepancies. Falco confers with our town solicitor, and they come to agreement. The town council advertised that there will be a vote on the ordinance, and then town council votes on the ordinance.
We probably have one other step in there that town council would probably have a discussion to determine the merits of what's being asked before we decide to advertise it. Now, I don't know whether that would be done publicly or an executive session, but I'm thinking it would probably be a public.
It's a public, because the ordinance changes for
Yeah.
the public.
Yeah, Jack, if I remember right, like it has to go to a vote to advertise it. I
Yes.
think
Yeah,
council,
they put on
council
the
has to
agenda.
approve it. Yeah, so yeah, you
it's
guys
on the
will be
agenda for
discussing it.
discussion, and then from there.
Yeah, but that's just the process, assuming that it moves along each step of the way.
Got it.
You
The only
figure
thing,
2 months.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Figure it takes 2 months.
Yeah, yeah. And the only thing I would add to that, Amy, or change is that I think we have already identified those issues. And it's just essentially now redlining those changes that we had to leave out of the previous version.
Exactly. That was gonna bring that up.
Okay. Thank you.
I also want everyone to understand these rules and regulations that have now been approved and are in effect are consistent with the current ordinances. All right. So if we then go in and make changes to the ordinances, the follow-up to that would be we would have to go back in and make changes to the rules and regulations that are then consistent with the new amended ordinances.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that should be somewhat easy because our recommended changes to the ordinances should be coming from the things that we wanted to change in the rules and regulations that we couldn't. So we're kind of working backwards, but
Right.
but because we already had those changes in the rules and regulations and we had to pull them out, we just take that stuff that we pulled out. That's the stuff that will eventually go into the rules and regulations, assuming the changes are made as we request them.
And we should submit to both at the same time. We should submit the recommended changes to the ordinance and the recommended changes to our regulations that would correspond if they were approved.
Could do that.
Do them simultaneously.
Yeah.
And that would be a good idea because otherwise it would add another step after the ordinance approval with a couple more months of us approving our changes to the rules and regulations and then town council approving them. So that'll
Right.
cut out some of the problems.
Yeah, I mean, from a timing perspective, that makes sense. The only downside, I guess, is that if council doesn't approve one section of it, then we have to edit 2 documents, but I don't think that's a big time commitment.
We'd have to do that anyway.
Yeah,
And hopefully whatever changes they make will be smaller than those that they accept. So,
right. So can I go back? Sorry, we kind of got changed directions, but I want to go back to the recommendation that Jack had to wait until the arbitration was over. And I probably asked this last month, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, and I don't have my notes from last month here handy. Can you give us a feel for the potential timeline for arbitration? I'm just trying to determine when this would be.
I hear all kinds of things. But I would suspect it'd be by year end. But that's just kind of a educated guess.
Okay.
It could go longer, it could be shorter.
Okay, so then is it? I guess we just have to wait for council to go into that executive session and discuss what, if anything, will be done with the current list. Up until the point where we have a new list generated. Is that accurate, or? I don't know, I'm a little confused because
I can't speak for everyone.
Yeah,
It'll be handled in executive session as to how they want to proceed. And I'm sure there'll be as many opinions as there are people.
yeah. It just seems strange to me that they voted to extend the list, but have no plans to do anything with it.
Well, it just provides breathing room.
Yeah. It's the way things happen.
I guess my question that comes up out of that is, last time we talked, and Ryan, I think you can chime in if I get this wrong, but I think what we said was the timeline from when we begin the process to when we put together a list was 5 to 6 months, like at the quickest. Chief, does that sound right to you? Am I remembering that right?
Probably fair to say, David, historically here, it's taken about a year from the time a test is announced until you might put your first set of boots on the street. Now, that could be rushed and moved up quicker, you know, if we have the ability to kind of push the process, you could shave time off of that. But open to close, you know, until at least you hire your first wave, probably you better figure on a year and hope for better.
So the question then becomes, and this is a question for town council, because it's, you know, because we've certified a list, there's an active list and it's out of our hands. But the question becomes then, does council want us to start that process of putting together a new list? So the existing list council has extended to March 26th. If I remember right, under the ordinance, it can be extended one additional time that would run until September 26th of next year.
There's
And if
nothing
I
in the
also
current
remember right,
ord-
I'm sorry, what was that, Falco?
There's nothing in the current ordinance. That was one of the reasons we wanted to adopt our rules and regulations. So we're operating under general law at this point as far as extending the list.
Okay, and under general law, how long is it a year or can it be extended indefinitely?
Up to a year.
Up to a year. So this list, no matter what, goes stale September 26th, 2024. And so if the timeline of starting the process and getting boots on the ground is a year, and this list goes stale a year from now, if we want to have a constant list, we have to start the next process now. And so the question to council is, we understand that you're going to hold off on a hiring decision, but what about the process for putting together the next list? Should we be going down that path? I mean, I think we probably should, but that requires starting this process again, and I don't know if we can really do that without a directive from council.
I think that the town manager should take a look at this with Chief Hawk and come up with a strategy, and we can present it at the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, if it can at least be discussed, and because, well, Falco, would we need a directive from council to start that process?
Yeah.
Okay, so we would need a directive from council to start that process. And given the timeline that Chief just said, and given the fact that this list runs out a year from today at the latest, council probably should put that on the agenda and make a decision on it at the next meeting. That's just my personal, I'm obviously not dictating to town council what to do, but just trying to think about the steps logically. Personally, I just think, one way or another, that decision has to get made as to starting that next process so that we have enough time to do it before it gets too late to do it.
I'll just put my 2 cents out there. David, that was my opinion actually right after we'd done the interviews, and I felt like we should have started the list over then, and I would highly encourage that right now. So you all know where I stand. I would fully support that.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe if that could just be put as an item on the agenda. I mean, Chief, I don't know if you have time to meet with the town manager in the meantime, and kind of specifically hash out, because just looking at it, everybody says, "Oh, we have a year." We don't. It's much more urgent than that.
And we don't, any of those people are off the list now. You don't know what
Right.
you might.
Yeah, we don't know where we stand. Like I said, best case scenario is that this list goes through September 26th of next year. That's the best case scenario. After September 26th, this list is done no matter what. So at that point, there needs to be a new list if town council is looking to hire. And you know, the initial reaction is, well, that's a year away, it's nothing to worry about. But that's why I kind of wanted to bring back up that timeline, Chief, that you mentioned in the last meeting. A year away is the timeline. It is now urgent. It's in the red zone. And especially after all the, you know, the stuff that Justin put together. Yeah, that's I'll step down from my soapbox now, but just wanted to make sure that it's clear that this is a lot more urgent than it may look from 37,000 feet.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, we keep waiting for this or waiting for that. And meanwhile, we're losing more officers very imminently with the, you know, the data that we heard from Justin last week. Is that something that we can share with council, or would they not care? I mean, there's no action to be taken on it. However, I think it's important information for people to know kind of how dire the circumstances are.
Oh, I was assuming that we did share it with council.
You have
We
to be
did.
very careful with that.
So what I did do is I'm not on Facebook. I actually created a Facebook account and I put in the Town of Canlis Open Discussion Facebook group a link to that meeting, that specific meeting. Not one person commented on it. And I think the amount of views is like 17, and I think I viewed it 5 times myself.
Well, and maybe people don't want to watch an hour-long meeting, but they might look at that one document if you link it.
Yeah.
You know, if we could.
Well, the document was shared with council.
Oh, it was.
Okay,
That was-
good.
I can't say that everybody read the document, but it was
They may not have read the rules and regulations either.
all I can tell you is so much to read for this
I
meeting. It
know,
was insane.
You always do.
Yeah, I hear you, Jack.
Can I take us in a different direction? I know we've only got 8 minutes left, so just putting this out there, the other takeaway for me from that information that we talked about last week, and this is not news, but we have a lack of leadership. So not anything against you, Chief Hawk. I'm just saying from a team design perspective, we need more sergeants, we need potentially more detectives, more lieutenants, potentially an assistant chief. So what would be the process or protocol for determining if any of those positions open up? Because we need more officers first and foremost, but maybe while we wait for some of those things to play out, if we have to wait, which sounds like we do, we tackle that element instead, the leadership.
Essentially the roles, responsibility, the leadership, how the department is structured. That
Right.
piece.
Looking at the structure of the team and knowing that we have gaps there in lots of leaders being retirement eligible or planning retirement.
And that could actually help whenever you're sourcing through that list, determine what skill sets might be better fit in different areas, depending upon what your roles and responsibility breakdown are within that department. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh.
So turning our attention towards promotions versus new hires while we wait for the arbitration or whatever else to play
Amy,
out.
what you're proposing is just an analysis of the structure, because we can't do anything as far as going to hire promotion unless the town council gives us the green light.
Well, that's kind of what I'm suggesting. So part of that information was showing that we lack certain positions. So is that a discussion with town council? Is that part of Chief Hawk's discussion with Brian and say, look, you know, here's what our structure was 5 years ago. Here's what it is now. June has an org chart that shows the gaps, and maybe having, I don't know the right procedure to follow, but I feel
Amy,
like it's something to explore as well.
I believe the proper approach to that would be between the town manager and the
Mm-hmm.
chief. And then they would come to consensus and then bring it to council for their input.
Well,
Okay,
doesn't-
so
If you try to have a committee figure this out,
Yeah,
Trust
doesn't
me.
the chief make those recommendations?
yeah,
to-
chief with the
Yeah,
town man, he
yeah,
reports to the
right.
town manager.
Right, he knows where his priorities are, right, chief? You
You
know
catch
what you
that?
need. Tell us what you need. Besides more
Well,
officers.
yeah. Yeah, I think Bob and I, before Brian, and then Brian and I, we have discussions about the needs for the hiring and the promotions. We've been able to promote 2 sergeants in the last, year or so. And unfortunately, probably, nothing's for certain. 2 of my next retirements, maybe in the spring, maybe again in the fall, will be my supervisors. So we'll be losing more people on the street and supervisors. So I think, what's the backbone? It's the police department, it's the officers on the street. That's my priority. I need to continue to have a command structure. I don't want to be too top heavy ever. But the priority is the officers that respond to the calls by all means. That's my A1. And then later on, whenever we have this,
Influx.
embarrassment of riches and all these officers, then we'll promote some people. That'd be my plan.
well,
Yeah,
and
you-
I guess priority is getting new officers in. I'm just trying to somehow fill the gap of it. Like, I feel like, okay, well, let's just sit back and wait for council to be ready to do something with new officers. I mean, I don't know.
Well, with where we are with the additional changes now, I'll just call them the additional changes that would require changes to the ordinances. Are we at the position, Falco, I think you're at the position where you have those changes so that work can start, based off of the changes that we had to pull out of our proposed rules and regulations. I think
So
we
what you're
have
saying-
all those.
Is Falco gonna put this list together of the ordinance changes that we're talking about? Cause we haven't decided who's gonna do that yet.
Right, yeah, exactly, Matt. That's what I'm trying to hit here, is to make sure that we know what we're doing so that we're not waiting until the next meeting to do whatever it is.
This is Selko. Again, my preference would be that the personnel board come up with that list. I don't want to assume anything or miss anything. And then once that list is given the green light by the personnel board, then I can take that list and make the proposed ordinance revisions.
Okay, so we'll need the version of the document that had Falco's comments, where we'll need the version of the document that showed all of the red line changes that included Falco's comments of the changes that could not be submitted to town council because they were inconsistent with the ordinance. So we need that version of the document.
Can you send that to us, Mr. Falco, so we can go through that and make that list?
Yes, I still have that version. I can make sure that we recirculate it.
I erased everything except the final version because there was just too many there to remember which.
No, I understand.
Yeah, I mean,
They-
I probably have it saved somewhere as well, but I think it's probably safer if Falco sends the version that he has, because I may have made my own notations on my copy or something like that.
So next meeting, we should come with those versions, or can we send them to you via email, or how are we going to do this to move this along?
I think you, once everyone has it and goes through it, I think you should send your comments back to Amy, and then Amy can send me the final list of issues.
Well, I
Well,
don't know that
we would
everyone,
send, yeah, I mean, it could be one person like David or me or whoever goes through and pulls out that stuff, sends it to Amy, and then Amy distributes it to everybody, and we discuss it real quick the next meeting, and then that way we can make changes and improve it or whatever, and then send it on to council.
And if I can get that version from Falco, I'm willing to take our active version that is now passed. And I'm willing to create the red line based off of, Falco's comments of what he had to pull out. And then send that around to council or to the personnel board. So that we have a red line for the next meeting and we can formalize any of those changes. I mean, I'm willing to do that if everybody's okay with doing that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
So I'll take the red line that Falco sends me that has those changes. I'll pass those changes through to our now effective rules and regulations in red line. And then Amy, I'll just send it to you for you to circulate, but I'll send that red line to you and Falco, and then you can circulate it to everybody however we need to do that.
okay.
And that way, and I'll get that done well in advance of the next meeting as long as I get that, that one version, as long as I get that relatively soon.
Okay, thanks for doing that, David.
I have one last question that's kind of follow up on your comment there, Amy. Is like the promotion list that we put together several years ago, when does that expire? Or has it already expired?
That's a good question.
I believe it's already expired. I think we looked into that a while back and it had expired.
So that's something that town council needs to give us direction on, is when they want us to put another promotion list together.
I thought the chief did that. Didn't we just say that? I'm not understanding this process.
Well, and that was a list for sergeants specifically. I can't recall without having the org chart in front of me if there were, but I think that there were other opportunities to promote other than the sergeant rank. And when you said, Chief Hawk, that 2 of the next retirements will be supervisors, is supervisors synonymous with sergeants or?
So it'll be my only lieutenant and one of the sergeants.
Oh,
Those
So-
are 2 I'm aware of coming up in the next year, less than a year to year-ish.
well, that's what I'm saying. Like, we need to create a lieutenant list. We don't have, well, for that matter, we don't have a sergeant list anymore. We've done that before, but
Well, what I'm really saying is that the town manager, somebody needs to come up with a strategy of all this, because we can't do a promotion list and a new hiring list and at the same time. It sounds like we have 3 different positions, the new hire, sergeant and lieutenant. We can't, they're going to need to be spaced out, and it sounds like we may need them sooner than later.
Personally, I think we should get the new hire list, because there may be candidates for officers' positions that we interview. And I wouldn't want to exclude them just because of longevity.
That's a great point. I would agree.
Yeah, we just need direction, because these things are starting to come to a head, and we just need to know which way to move next.
sorry, I'm not sure I understood what you said, Jack. New hire list because what?
I think we should have our list of new hires first, because that new hires list may actually have some officer candidates that we think should step up. I don't think officers in the town need to be promoted just because of longevity. I think it needs to be the best person in the job. And I believe in competition. Maybe we'll get some competition with our force and we'll get a better force out of it.
I
So
see
I
what
think
we could hire
I'm second.
external into those sergeant or lieutenant positions versus promoting from within.
I'm not sure you can hire into those positions. Brian, can you?
So the process has been here for at least longer than I've been here. You need 5 years as a McCandless officer to be eligible to test for the sergeant position.
Okay.
5 years in the sergeant to be able to test for lieutenant.
It's a moot point then.
Yeah,
But
Yeah, and the new, and Jack, the new hire list, you know, you guys have the only new hire list that we can do without further direction from council. So there's nothing else we can do to put together any new hire list until we get direction from council to do so.
I think Ryan had a point here.
it was just simply that some of our newer officers, but that had 5 years, can in theory test, and if they're quality and have the experience, they could. But unfortunately, I think the way we're currently set up, someone who comes in new might have 5 years on in another agency. They can't take our sergeant test till they get 5 years here.
Is that a past practice or is that a rule?
I believe it's a past practice. I haven't seen it in writing. But that doesn't mean, I guess, that it doesn't exist, but I'd have to double check the policies, man.
Falco's, any of that sound familiar? Or did you jump off?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, as far as past practice of having somebody enroll, as far as on the force for 5 years where they can take their next level tests. Did you ever come across anything in ordinances or any other kind of documents or anything that you read going through this
or has
exercise?
there been a challenge?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Send it-
I believe that is in the ordinance. Hold on 1 second, let me double check.
And then, well, he checks that. I have another question. So if we expect your lieutenant to retire and we only have one sergeant and the sergeant hasn't been in that position for 5 years, then what? We just have to wait until someone has 5 years tenure as a sergeant?
Really, we've not been in that position, Amy. I couldn't say for sure, you know, the rules could be changed if you ran into that.
Hmm.
We do have 1, 2, 3 sergeants in theory that would be eligible to take the lieutenant test, but one of them is a retiring sergeant. So in reality, it's probably 2 sergeants eligible to take the lieutenant's test currently, or even next year. I have a couple sergeants that don't have anywhere near enough time yet to be able to take the lieutenant's test. Not
Okay.
to do it, just that they don't have the time and rank.
Hey, June, would you mind, if it's not too much work to update it, just circulating an updated org chart to this group? That was very helpful. I'm a visual person to see what positions are filled, what positions are vacant, who's in what roles now.
Sure.
Thank you.
And before I forget, along with that previous version of the rules and regulations with the additional changes, can somebody also send me the past the version that has been approved by council in Word? I just realized I only have the PDF of it, and if I'm going to create a red line, I need the Word version.
I think that would be a Falco ask too.
I think what was attached to the announcement for this meeting had that final version.
It had the PDF version. At least what I got had the PDF version, but not the Word version.
Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry, you need a Word version. Okay.
Yeah, because if I'm going to do the red line, I need a Word version to go off of.
Okay, so Falco, you were researching something. Now I forget what.
About the 5-year promotion cycle.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I'm looking at the ordinance and I do not see the year requirement in the existing ordinance. Hold on.
Seems like pretty drastic. You can't have to.
Yeah, it feels
In the new rules and regulations that we just adopted, we have that an applicant for the position of sergeant shall have at least 1 year of continuous prior service with the police department, and an applicant for the position of lieutenant shall have at least 4 years of continuous prior service as a full-time police officer with the police department.
I like that a lot better.
Yeah.
Gives a lot more flexibility, and that way we're not just having to stick with sergeants that select from sergeants.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And that's the ordinance as it reads. Good.
That's the rules and regulations.
Oh,
yeah, I'm not seeing any time of service requirement in the ordinance for promotions. The only thing, Falco, my next question would be a legal question, so probably for executive session, if we can maybe pop into an executive session quick at the end of this meeting.
okay, so I'm looking at the agenda. The only other item is general updates. And then public comments. We don't have any public, so Chief or anyone else, any general updates?
Yeah, the social worker, thank you, June. We have our next social worker intern down there, so forward any, cases you might have. She's ready to work. Her name's Sophia. Will be with us for the duration of the Slippery Rock school year. As far as community engagement, we had Community Day. Myself and Officer Davis and his new canine partner were sworn in that evening. I believe that was September 9th that occurred. So it seemed like a good time was had by all. I think Mr. Casey was there that evening. In a booth, if I recall. Other community engagement this past month, can you think of anything? Trying to remember my
What's the new canine officer's name?
Sorali.
Sorali, that's right. I gotta think of, do you have any good tricks to remember the pronunciation?
Sir Ali.
Okay, thanks.
Remember it.
Yeah, I know. I just had this in front of me last night. Trainings and stuff with the department. I'm trying to think of other community engagement things we were involved in. Oh, Officer Metzger did Shop with the Cop in August. Where he met with the local, youth from the town, down at Macy's, a lot of other area law enforcement down there with students from their respective jurisdictions and school districts. Bigs and Blues about to start back up. Just had a training on it. I think my first Bigs and Blue meeting's coming here in the next few weeks, where we'll get together with students at McKnight Elementary School. The Bigs, there's myself, Sergeant Egley, Officer Metzger, some medics that are also involved. I think this year we've recruited a state trooper, maybe some county police. We're trying to grow the program. And if anything else hits me, but those are the things I think we covered last month since we last met.
Also want to shout out to police department arresting that robbery suspect.
Yeah. And
Justin?
Chief Hawk being on the news.
Was I on the news? I don't know.
Look
You
good.
were.
I'll pay you for that.
Justin, what's wrong?
Leaving the bank.
Oh, that's right, honey.
Yeah, we were able to identify and get him in custody. Thanks to Sergeant Eric Egley and his partner Michael Bach. My detectives, they did a bang up job. Bringing that to a pretty quick conclusion, finding the suspect out of county, getting him into custody and safely. And so this is where the town of McKeown was historically, in my opinion, the detective, an old detective, where these serial bank robbers come to die, so to speak. We usually catch them. And I don't want to regret saying that. I'll knock on wood, but
Are you list?
And what was that Huntington Bank? What
Yeah.
bank was? Huntington, yeah.
It's Rosen, right?
Yeah, well, no, it's the one that's by Crunch Fitness and the Dunham Sports.
Oh, that one. Yeah, that's what I meant. Oh, that's Ross, isn't it?
No, it's
No,
just
is that-
Kinley.
so you're right there at the line.
Line,
The PNC Bank, the
Right.
line runs right through it. Like I think the town owns the vault. You know, and the rest of the building is at Ross. So
Gotcha.
Who get, that's all I care about.
Okay, so should we adjourn and move to executive session, or is there any other updates, comments?
Nothing from me.
Okay, Falco, do we vote on adjourning, or can we just move to executive session?
As long as we're not going to come back and vote on anything, you can adjourn and go into executive session.
Okay, let's do that.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second,
All in favor? Aye.
aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. So Chief, if you would stop the recording, please.